I wish to thank my dear sister, Dr. Barbara Stinson, President of the World Food Prize Foundation, for her commendable efforts to mobilize World Food Prize laureates to write to President Joseph Biden on our collective call for greater attention to global hunger and nutrition in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. COVID-19 has thrust the world into its worst economic crisis since World War II. The impact of the pandemic is not minimalistic. The impacts are systemic. No part of the world has been spared, and no economy has been spared either. Globally, 117 million people have been affected by the virus, and 2.6 million people have died, unfortunately. In Africa, there has been 4 million infections and 105,000 deaths. African economies went into the worst economic recession in 50 years. To support African countries, the African Development Bank swiftly launched a $10 billion COVID-19 crisis response facility. The bank also launched a $3 billion Fight COVID-19 social bond on the global capital market, the largest ever US dollar denominated social bond in world history. We're doing this because of the poor. The poor have been most badly affected as they are the most vulnerable, with bare survival incomes, poor access to healthcare facilities, living in poor areas, especially in slums, in poorly ventilated dwellings, without access to water and sanitation. They cannot wash their hands, and there is no water. And they cannot do social distancing, as many stay in one room and in densely populated environments. The poor rely on informal jobs. As economies went into lockdowns, millions lost wages. For them and their families, a day without work is a day without food. Another day to go to sleep hungry. Hunger has increased all over due to the pandemic. Globally, the number of hungry people has increased by a whopping 270 million people, an increase of over 82% compared to the situation before the pandemic. Now, more heartbreaking is stunting and malnutrition, as has risen with an additional 7 million kids now wasted due to lack of access to basic food and basic nutrition. Africa has been especially worst hit. Over 30 million Africans fell into extreme poverty in 2020. By the end of 2021, about 39 million people in Africa will have fallen into extreme poverty. Over 30 million jobs were lost at the end of 2020 due to this pandemic. Climate change has worsened the situation, with massive locust invasions and droughts in East and Southern Africa, respectively. More than ever, the world faces a confluence of climate change, conflicts, health pandemic, or swelling and throwing more people into hunger and even misery. Access to food has plummeted, and hunger has increased as global supply chains were disrupted. Transport and logistics were shut down. Unemployment increased. Families lost wages, and remittances declined. As the world's economies grow back, we must now reverse these massive negative effects of the rising global hunger and malnutrition. Bold measures are needed to put food and nutritional security at the forefront of the global agenda. We must rapidly scale up access of farmers to agricultural technologies, especially climate-smart technologies. We must accelerate nutrition programs, especially school feeding programs, and they're very effective, and community-based food access programs for mothers and children to reverse malnutrition. Now, we must improve access of women, especially to finance for productive work and higher earnings. We must expand access to water and to sanitation. And finally, we must rebuild rural economies, ensuring access to adequate health care for all and resilient incomes and livelihoods. The poor must be provided with access to vaccines. Now, while we must avoid developed countries monopolizing vaccines and leaving developing countries behind, we must also avoid elite capture of vaccines that leaves the poor and the less privileged behind. The reality is, millions of people today face greater risks of dying from hunger than from the coronavirus pandemic. And that is why the African Development Bank rolled out a $378 million Feed Africa response to COVID-19 that we call FAREC for food and nutrition. We scaled up the provision of improved seeds and fertilizers and other planting materials in 21 countries to raise food production. Without food, medicines and vaccines do not work. Food and nutrition are the vaccines for hunger and malnutrition. Let us vaccinate the world against hunger and malnutrition with access to adequate and nutritious food for all. As my late mentor, Nobel Peace Prize winner Dr. Norman Borlaug once said, "Food is a moral right of all who are born into this world." Now, my dear colleagues, World Food Prize laureates, it's time for a new compact, hunger vaccines for all. Now let's work together and get it done. The world badly needs it. Thank you very much.